Hello and welcome. I'm Richard Hooper, the Publishing Director at the Satellite Evolution Group. I would like to welcome everybody to today's RoundTable event, Earth Stations Meeting the Changing Demand, sponsored by Walton de-ice. If anybody has any questions they'd like to ask during the discussion, please use the chat and questions function that you can find at the side of your screen. Now, let me start by introducing the panelists. Many of you will know Martin Coleman from his many years spearheading several significant initiatives, leading the advance in new tools to resolve all types of interference, such as SatGuard for VSAT systems, and the campaign to introduce carrier ID across all transmissions. Martin sits on the Satcoms Innovation Group Advisory Board. Our next panelist is Ray Powers, the Director Sales and Marketing at Walton Enterprises, a company that designs and manufactures a line of equipment that prevents the accumulation of snow and ice on satellite Earth station antennas. And finally, I'm pleased to be joined by David Andre, the VP of Sales and Business Development at Santander Teleport. He has 20 plus years of experience in satellite communications and media markets, and leads the marketing and business development activities for Santander Teleport, a successful teleports operator and service provider to enterprise, mobility and government customers. Welcome, gentlemen. We're talking about the ground segment today, not considered the most glamorous sector of the satellite industry, but nonetheless one of the most important. In fact, some would say critical. So I'm going to start off by asking, what is the biggest challenge facing the teleport operator today? Now, Martin, if you could open up talking about that, that would be great.
Oh well, thank you, Richard. Where do I start with this one? Well, I'm gonna blame Ray for this one. We just to take the audience a little back. We had a discussion about de-ice, and Ray said we're not to talk about de-ice because that's product, so we need to talk about teleports. And it became apparent that if you start to think about the challenges facing teleports today, de-ice hits the environmental challenges, costs, the running costs of a ground station. And we talked about, for instance, going from, the normal electric into gas, savings made there. And of course, then you start to wonder, does a teleport operator have to look at other fuel sources? Maybe hydrogen fuel is going to be on that agenda soon. It's not just electric and solar and wind power and goodness knows what. So first challenge for a teleport is the environment, and it's a big one, and it goes full circle, because when I start to think about what else you've got to do, well, the cloud, well, is that an energy problem as well? Does that start to push the energy, or is the cloud going to be effectively something like an Amazon, Google supply where the teleport operator just simply uses cloud that's already provided? And what role does that play for a teleport? Is it real? Do they need their own cloud? Big issues there. The other thing is before I get into the challenges of teleport operation, what about the role of the satellite industry in 5G? Do we have a role? And if we do, can someone please tell me what it is? Because the teleport, I hear it, but I don't really see it. So, what is our role? Because we can't ask the mobile industry to create a role. We have to create that role. So we've got, just to recap, environment, cloud, 5G. But one more thing. Let's just put a challenge back into this. Okay, 5G and C-band. There's a good one. Ray and I and no disrespect, Ray, being on the slightly over 50 mark, we think big antennas. So could we recycle the big antennas? That's a good idea, recycling big antennas, because guess what? We could put a filter in there, but we know we lose 3 dB in G over T. But the thing is, if we have a bigger antenna, we can afford to do that. So perhaps that's a way of quickly mitigating. We use the bigger antennas, so maybe that's a way forward. Oh, hang on a minute. Oh, dear, we're back to de-ice. The bigger the antenna, we need bigger de-ice system. Oh, no, we're going to use more energy. I think that sums up the challenges for a teleport operation these days. I'll leave it there, Richard.
Well, Well, thank you. You seem to have covered a whole hour's roundtable discussion in 4 minutes. But to pull it back on track so that we can just discuss each segment individually. Established businesses face disruption from new models of connectivity. So we've got HGS, MEO, LEO, rising domination of software over hardware. The innovators in the business are disrupting their own operations by innovating up the value chain to meet new customer needs. Pointing this at David as a teleport operator, what pressure is this putting on you? What effect is this having on you, David?
Yeah, so I think you put it very well there, Richard. I would probably say that some of the biggest challenges today for the teleport operator are the verticalization that is happening in the industry, whereby companies that used to do only one part of that, supply chain, whether a teleport, a service provider, a satellite operator, everyone had their own box or their own area of expertise. But now it seems to be that that the market is going through a lot of consolidation, and in particular, the role of satellite operators becoming service providers, having their own teleports, etc., make it a direct competitor with satellites being the main asset that only they possess. I'm talking about not only the geo operators, but LEOs and MEOs are coming with an offer that, due to the architecture, not so much the fact that they want to do it this way, but due to the architectures of the whole operation, everything needs to be controlled under the same management system. So one entity has to control the whole constellation, and it's not just about constellation is not anymore about just the satellites, but also the ground stations and everything well connected and synchronized together. So for a traditional teleport operator that provides standard teleport services and offer their teleport to others to install their antennas or provide the uplink and downlink services, in some areas there are challenges, but it also brings new opportunities, because both HTS, Geo HTS, and LEO and MEO, more than ever, they need more ground segment than they have needed ever before. There is a lot more importance in the ground segment. Not everything happens in the satellite, but it's all about a whole big ecosystem that can play a part globally. For those teleport operators, and that probably would be, I would say, the majority of them, that have become a service provider themselves. If you look at the history of teleport operators, most of them, they have specialized on either being a broadcast managed service provider that use their own teleport, or a data service provider, etc. For those, the challenges probably as a service provider are bigger, because you are directly facing the satellite operators competition.
Well, we talked about the value chain there, so let's bring in Ray. Ray, you're a product developer. You're working with teleports. You're working with your de-ice products. What effect are the changes in the ground segment having on your sort of development programs for your products?
Well, first of all, Richard and Satellite Evolution Group, we appreciate this opportunity for giving ground segment operators a voice. Seems to be ignored, largely because it's not exciting. Rockets and satellites are exciting. And this is where I come into play, where we are a manufacturer, and who we deal with primarily is actually satellite manufacturers. 20% of the end users are our customer base. However, in the exact opposite, 80% of my time is spent with those ground system operators, and I hear and witness the challenges that they receive, which brings us to this point. Over the years, very briefly, I know I only have a minute. Over the years, we've witnessed the growth of the industry and it all, C-band and then to KU band and then to KA band. And we've had to make adjustments and listen to the manufacturers, and then the ground system operators give us their feedback. And so we learn as we go and develop as we go. Watching the 5G development, we were anxious to see what was going to happen, largely because we suspected, as Martin said, bigger antennas and coming back, and then the reemergence of C-band, and watching teleport operators with new installations or changeovers. And then that's where we came in, and you're getting bigger antennas, and specifically to what we provide, that means an increased energy demand. And very often when the industry starts expanding, the last people they go to is the ground system operator. And then they're tasked with the challenges of meeting those needs. And geographically, wherever they're located, Santander, I haven't been there, and I don't know where your primary power supply comes, but for most operators, it comes from the local municipality. And there's limitations there. And then, of course, if they exceed those limits, then the increased costs are involved there. All of that lands right back in our lap because we have to try and develop a product that reduces the requirement for energy uses. So again, without delving into our product line, in a roundabout way, I hope I answered your question, that we have to meet the needs of the ground system operator and not necessarily the antenna manufacturer.
Well, talking about this this investment and the change in the ground segment. So let's go back to you, David. So if we look at teleport operators, they're continuing to prioritize their teleport Satcom infrastructure, encode, decode, and modem technology, and network management systems for investment. Now, has that investment shifted to cover the rising importance of data center, IP infrastructure, OTT technology, and security and encryption?
I think it has in certain areas more than others. In particular, those areas where, particular the baseband elements. Let's say a teleport is divided into the baseband and the RF chain, radio frequency chain. The radio frequency chain, RF chain, antennas, etc. There is not much you can do there to change things in terms of using the cloud infrastructure to do that. You're always going to need antennas and big amplifiers. Those cannot be virtualized as far as I know. However, everything that has to do with baseband, and you can see probably one of the earliest areas that have been virtualized and moved to a cloud infrastructure from dedicated pieces of equipment, expensive dedicated pieces of equipment, to a virtualized environment, I would say probably has been the media and broadcast business, whereby you wanted to do anything with media management, play out, compression of channels, distribution, etc. You had to buy a lot of expensive dedicated equipment before. Nowadays, you can just go and source a lot of the computing power that runs a number of software applications that provide that architecture for managing those broadcast services, and you can outsource that using a cloud service. You can do that on your own private cloud, but even more efficiently using a public cloud. The likes of Amazon, Microsoft, etc. They already sell products that can do that. Now that would bring advantages and disadvantages. These advantages, for example, is that you don't have to have a heavy upfront cost on infrastructure anymore. Amazon is doing that for you. I'm saying Amazon for the sake of an example. But then on the other hand, and then you can be a lot faster in the marketplace, whereby if someone needs a new service quickly, you don't have to wait to buy all that infrastructure, bring it into your teleport, wait for a couple of months till everything comes in, install it, wire it, etc. We're talking months before everything is ready to provide for the service to be provided. Now you basically just deploy those software assets onto that already available virtualized server. So it has good things. It has advantages and disadvantages. And if you want to call it disadvantage, then you could basically say that you have a lot less control because you depend on someone else's infrastructure. What happens is that third party that's providing you all that computing power, I don't know, has an outage or for whatever reason disappears, because it's in a bad shape. It's a very sticky environment. It's not easy to move between different cloud service providers. Let's put it that way. And also you have the challenge of the talent. You need to bring new people in that can, run those new services on a completely new environment.
Well, we've got a question coming in from one of the audience. With the big switch to cloud services, which you mentioned, how big an issue is cybersecurity, particularly with the increase in the digital usage going on at the moment? Martin, do you want to have a crack at that? And then David can give his view.
Yeah, by all means, Richard. In fact, it runs into what we were thinking about, that investment trend. I think the whole thing is geared up that the cloud base, the virtualization of everything is the general big way forward, because that's where the terrestrial and satellite service mix can really happen. That's possibly where even our role in 5G might exist, in that area where things can be swapped around in the cloud, and that changes the way we route things. So I think that the investment trend is going to be where the cloud, because everything else, the network management, automation, moving to data analytics is going to be easier to run in the cloud with where you have information available. And then, of course, we move on to machine learning and AI. I think that's a little way off in our case, but it's certainly going to happen and be more part of how we deal with services. Because I'd like to go back a little further in a way with this one, back to what David was talking about. And a thought crossed my mind about the LEO. When you think of a teleport now, most of the big LEO operators to come are supplying their own ground gateways, which then effectively are going to be built largely again on the cloud. So do we see teleports in amongst that investment and that push to cloud, that services end up cloud to cloud? In other words, the traditional teleport doesn't do traditional just the satellite link anymore. It's actually pushing towards cloud to cloud joining of services, because if the LEO guys brought it down in the cloud, the operator's picking it up a service for a client to maybe retransmit again on a different satellite system, whatever. But that's a cloud to cloud connection rather than what we're traditionally bits of fiber and more direct routing, shall we say. So I see a ton of changes here, but the cloud is right in there, and it's probably the big investment. But like I think David referred to it, he used Amazon as the classic example at the moment, the AWS systems. That's where everybody's heading, is that the teleport operator perhaps doesn't have to think about how to build the cloud, it's how to use the cloud, and what is that cost to use the cloud. I don't know what that cost will work out at, but it's probably going to work in favor of everyone, that it'll probably price drop for the customer in the end because of that flexibility and effectively no equipment. It's a no equipment environment, no physical equipment in that sense. That's my thinking. I hope that helped. Sorry, Richard.
Probably not. But David,
thank you.
David, going back to the cybersecurity bit. So for you as a teleport, it's got to be secure. You can't afford anybody to break into this. So what is the issue here? How big an issue is it? Everybody talks about cybersecurity at the moment. A lot of people ignore it. A lot of people take it seriously. You're a teleport. What are you thinking?
Well, cybersecurity is one of our top top issues or conversations at the moment on coffee times. I mean, there are certain things that we take it seriously. There are certain things that we have done, and in the last year we have achieved certain certifications that basically, are part of a lot of the work that we have been doing in the last couple of years, in particular, putting a lot of effort on it. I think the question that it was asked by the audience was about the cloud and cybersecurity, whether that adds additional risk to it. I think the most important thing, whether you use cloud service providers or whether you do things internally yourself, is that your cybersecurity posture is very strong. So you know how to evaluate. You have a risk management framework, and you make sure that you evaluate all your assets, have your inventories done, understand where the threats are. You constantly need to keep well informed of potential threats, and work with the right partners in order to mitigate those risks, the risk provoked by those threats. So whether you do that, whether you use the cloud or not, the main thing is that if you use a cloud service provider, you use someone that you can trust that they're doing the right thing. So, and I would think that, many of the well-reputed cloud service providers, they put a lot of investment on cybersecurity. And at the same time, I also think that they're probably, especially the bigger companies, are more visible to the potential, let's call it the potential cybersecurity attackers. But the main thing is that you understand cybersecurity, or you work yourself with partners that allow you to make sure you have a well-managed cybersecurity posture. That's the most important thing.
Right. So,
Richard, can I jump in there a little bit? Because I think that's where possibly some of the investment towards cloud is where the only winners in cloud are the ones that are going to secure that cloud. In other words, it's imperative on the person like an Amazon or a Google or whoever. They have to be secure to bits for everybody's sake. So in a way, that doesn't relieve a teleport operator of a problem, or it needs to think about it, because obviously there's the local security connections to think about. But if you're in the cloud, I think that's starting to solve a big problem quite simply, because you're in that safe environment, and that's the way they're being built. That's not to say it's a light subject, but I think that's a good thing about the cloud. In other words, it'll only be the best and the most secure that win that game. And if they're not good enough, they're out of business. It'd be as simple as that.
Well, going back before we had that question, we talked about how teleport operators prioritize, the structure, what they're doing, where the investment is. But we never actually sort of answered the question, how is the investment shifting? So I'm sort of going to throw this back at you, David, in that the investment is clearly shifting, but what are you prioritizing? What for you is the biggest investment shift at the moment?
Okay, so I mean, if you are talking about me or our company, Santander Teleport, we are what I call a more traditional teleport operator. So the services that we provide, most of them make use of the RF infrastructure, not so much of the value-add services that you provide, adding that the service provider would use, whether it's all the baseband infrastructure that provides a broadcast service or an end-to-end managed data service. So all from our point of view, from Santander Teleport, we from an operational point of view, we haven't shifted an awful lot of infrastructure to the cloud. We're making use of some of tools to support maybe operation monitoring of the teleport, but that's nothing compared to what perhaps other teleport operators, stroke service providers are doing. I can think of some that basically have moved most of their broadcast service operation, and I'm saying broadcast again because that's probably one of the areas where it is most affected. But you used to have racks and racks of infrastructure with encoders, multiplexers, playout servers, all sorts of media management servers, etc. And all that now, you can have your data center with all that equipment empty nowadays. You can move that into the cloud if you want to do that. That doesn't affect us that much because we are not that kind of teleport operator. We're more a traditional teleport operator. Again, most of the infrastructure that is bringing us revenue is not so much baseband based, which is what you can move to the cloud, is RF based, radio frequency. So as far as I know nowadays, you won't be able to virtualize and bring to the cloud an antenna. And I'm not talking about flat panel antenna, I mean the kind of large antennas you need at a teleport, or an HPA or app converters, etc., etc. Even though slowly we are seeing some advances in some areas, like the digitization of analog signals, that potentially could bring even things like modems, etc., closer to the cloud, and then you just bring the digital signal from the cloud into the teleport and you plug it into the RF chain. But I think that it still has a lot of challenges to overcome.
Ray, can I bring you in here? Because, you've got your ear to the ground, you're supplying products. You must be able to track what the investment trends are at your end users. So what are you seeing generally? What are you seeing as an investment trend?
Well, aside from the very valid points that David just brought up, in understanding that we are a manufacturer of a very niche product, so not all teleports are using that. So my insight is gained through conversation and feedback from the actual end users. Trends and changes, most recently, is the expansion back to large antennas and the costs. Again, going back to the demand for energy, and then there's a lot of options just in that regard. We have trending changes where I have some existing customers that are looking to reduce that demand, and so we've come up with methods of helping them achieve that, sometimes as much as 75% reduction. And that's an ongoing thing. That's actually not relatively new, especially in the EU. There's some new regulations that require a reduction in energy usage, and that falls right on us. When the time comes and our systems kick on, that's a lot of energy, and that demand skyrockets. And so with these new regulations that are coming into play, especially in the EU, there's a breakdown of how many years and how much reduction, O2 reductions. We have all these things, and we only know about it when the operators inform us. And so that falls on me to try and stay ahead of the game and figure out ways that when we're approached, it's not a new question. We're ready to address that. So trending changes for us, and our observation is the reemergence of large antenna, C-band, and the energy demands, because a bigger antenna requires more energy.
Well, you've introduced a couple of things here, which I'm going to bring Martin in, and then I'm going to bring David back in onto this. So look, Martin, we've talked about teleports. They've got to be versatile. They've got to be ready to adapt to change. Now, there's certain things, change is affecting certain things. There's the environment, there's energy, Ray's brought in regulations in mainland Europe. What do you see, David? How are they going to meet these obligations? How are they still going to be able to deliver on the environment, energy reductions, all of this, keeping costs down and staying competitive? How are they going to do that, Martin?
Well, thank you for that wonderful question. Right now, Jill told me I had to smile more, but I'm starting to go seriously miserable now because that's a good one. Yeah. So I got to solve the teleport crisis. Okay. Sorry, David. I like what David said about that RF bit. That's where it sounds traditional, but it's where we are. And I'm pretty much sure that from certainly the HPA upwards, we'll leave up and down converters out of it. But from having a site with a connection to a satellite, we're going to need some of that, and you won't virtualize that. So that's the end of that. But I think what a teleport operator's really got to watch is when to virtualize, when have you got to make the changes that start to reduce the amount of actual equipment and you go to cloud? In other words, when is that critical moment between what you're used to be doing becoming what you're going to be doing? And I think the industry is not helping the teleport operator. I think the industry, 5G is a big opportunity. But I don't see we don't have a role in 5G. Full stop. As I said at the beginning, if we got one, let me know. I don't care. I don't mind being wrong, but I can't see it. So what is a teleport operator's role in 5G? Well, it's going to be darn critical, and it could be. Think about it, guys out there. If we use the 3 layers of space we now have, pretty much, let's assume Leo's up there and actually working, we'll go ahead a bit. We'll look on the bright side. You got Leo, MEO, and GEO. We know the M-Power type platform, multi-beam, clever, smart, in the MEO area. We know that SES, for instance, want to put that same payload into their GEO system. So we've got these wonderful opportunities up in the sky, like you said, Ray. We talk about it's rockets and satellites and everybody's full of that. Right on the ground, though, changes everything. I mean, does the teleport operator, is it a big operator now, or is it a very spread out operator? Do the cells mean more spread? The traditional one big site for a teleport, maybe it's not the same. Remember, the LEO guys are supplying their own gateways. Remember that. That's not a teleport operator's job anymore, but the services they're carrying must go through different teleports. They must be part of that connection package. So somewhere, and I don't know how you define this, maybe David can help me out here, but at some point, David's guys have got to think, when are these trends going to swap over where I've got to be ready for the new way forward? And I think it's up to the industry itself to lead better and get a role in 5G. I hear 3GPP, I hear all sorts of things going on, but we don't have a role in 5G when we could make 5G rock and roll through the layers of space and on the ground, and the cloud is the glue. So that's what I see as the future. But when does it? I have to add a question. When does that teleport operator make the change? When does it do that?
Well, you brought in something we were going to come on to, which is, the 5G. But I want to go back. I want to nail this versatility and how you stay competitive while dealing with the issues that ground segment have to do. David, back to you, because we want to nail this one before we move on. How do you stay versatile? How do you address environmental implications? As Ray said, bringing in larger antennas. There's an environmental implication there. There's space, which is limited. How do you go about it?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, it's a difficult question because in order to know how you deal with it, what is the future is really going to look like. I mean, at the moment we have a few hints. Okay, what we know is that we're using more and more higher frequency bands. So C-band is becoming less popular, and that's can also be synced to 5G for obvious reasons. Ku is still the main band, but Ka band is becoming very important, especially for the LEOs, also the GEOs. And now we're talking about QV. And someone called me the other day inquiring about W band, sorry, about 80 gigs for uplinking. So the higher the frequency, especially when you go from Ka band and upwards, and especially on big antennas, as Ray will surely know, those antennas are amazing pieces of precision engineering. You need to keep the structure as stable as possible and avoid any changes due to any changes to that structure due to temperature variations. So and also keep them as far away from things like ice and snow as possible. So in order to do that, today you need to consume a lot of energy, because you need to have air conditioning or cooling systems or heating systems or de-icing systems that keep the antenna at a certain temperature within a certain range most of the year. Otherwise, the beam of your antenna maybe start moving around, and those antennas have very thin beams, so you lose track of your satellites. Now, as an example, we have recently won a contract for an antenna hosting service, which basically means the satellite operator is going to install a large Ka band antenna at our teleport. This is our first large Ka band antenna, and the amount of energy that antenna or capacity that requires to keep it running is in the same order of magnitude as what we're using at the whole teleport, and which at the moment is focused. Up until now, we have C-band, Ku band, and X-band antennas. So and we have around 20 of them that can transmit. So one single antenna, it needs to have as much power capacity ready in case you need to switch on that de-icing system, as basically and the same order of magnitude and the rest of the teleport. How do we manage this? Well, obviously we're going to get more and more pressure, not just teleport operators, but everyone in this industry and any other industry, to reduce power, to be sensible about power consumption, etc. In order to do that, the best way we can do is use the tools that we have available to us. So obviously, some of the things that can be done are moving to greener energies, etc. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can try to become autosufficient, which is a big challenge for the amount of power consumption that we need to run in very short moments of time when you turn a de-icing system suddenly. Or you can basically contract with your electricity supplier to basically make sure that the electricity, your main supply, come from green sources. That's one of the ways you can do that. Also, it's not only just about the energy consumption. The whole subject goes into waste management, etc., etc. So there are a number of initiatives that you can take, not just as a teleport operator, but as any industry or company, in order to reduce your carbon footprint and your environmental footprint.
Okay, look, we mentioned 5G, so we're going to get straight into this one. Martin, 5G C-band spectrum, shifting non-critical usage to other delivery bands. What is the real impact? From the investment point of view, how does the teleport operator reconfigure ground segment to deal with this shift? And after you finish talking, I'm going to ask David whether you're right or wrong. So
fair enough. That's all right. No, that's good.
You better get this fairly accurate.
Well, you've opened a can of worms now, because we're back to big antennas, and that's more de-icing again. There we go. We're gonna get there. I tell you, we're not losing sight of the de-ice situation. It's interesting. We love that circle. Okay, 5G and C-band. We do have a problem, or do we? In other words, we talk about it as a problem, but in terms of evidence, shall we call it, I see very little. I hear things, but I don't see it. Nobody's come knocking on my door saying, can you fix this, Martin? Even though we're actually trying to fix the problem of when you, let alone when it's out-of-band interference of 5G. But remember, the mobile operators are actually interfering with their own cell structures between towns and cities. So they've actually got their own problem. And we know that 5G's been forming. So why can't beams be formed to mist? For instance, in the UK, we only really have 5 big teleports. I think it was only 4 large teleports in the country that need that extra bit of protection. Surely with all the technology and all the regulators' power, we could just manage to move the signals around those sites. Yeah, it's not, I don't think that's a big ask. But nobody will do anything if a teleport operator doesn't stand up and say, we have a problem. In other words, you know, it'd be interesting what Dave says. Does he have a problem? Perhaps he doesn't yet. Does he expect a problem? Down here in the southwest, we've got the famous Goonhilly station. They are expecting to see problems in the next 2 years at C-band. May I just add, the other big problem with all this, and this goes back to the ITU, we could go in a real mess now. We could get really, really gritty here with our industry and with the mobile. We don't even use all the band we're given, and the mobile don't use all the bands they're given, and there's great chunks of band that are just sitting there idle. Why are we not using that up properly so that we're all in the right places and we don't have to have a fight about it every 4 years or whatever it is? And then you've got, here's another story for you. A very good friend of mine in a certain satellite operations center let me know that they applied for a new antenna system in a country, KA band, and were refused a license because mobile had already booked it and the satellite was second place, not first place. So they can't put a KA band system in because the mobiles booked the frequencies with the regulator first. In other words, the priority, like for us in satellite terms, has always been, we've had antennas here all over the place forever and ever and ever, and we need them protected. Bang the table. Tables are turning. The mobiles being first to use the frequencies, and then the satellite becomes subservient to that. How does a teleport operator even deal with that issue? And that's at KA. Keep moving it up. It's going to be all the way up the bands. And in the meantime, we've got whole sections in the S-band area that aren't used. We've got chunks of C-band we don't use. There's band up there. There's probably enough to go round, but is anybody getting to grips with this? Because the teleport operator needs help. You can't just keep having a war about frequencies at the ITU and having a battle every 4 years with the WRC and then expect the teleport operator to then see the problem and think, now what do I do? Now what do I do? The regulator's favouring 5G because they've got to economically. You can't blame them. Look at the money the FCC's got. Was it $80 billion they've called in for their sale of the C-band frequencies in the US? I mean, it's a big number, give or take 10 billion. Let's not worry about it. You can't blame them. The economy dictates the problem. You know, we've had the COVID, we've got furlough, we've got bills to pay as a government. You can't blame them. I think the UK just made £1.636 billion on a sale recently. This is difficult for David to fight. So does David expect to see a problem? And if so, how's he going to deal with it?
Well, let's go to David. Is Martin right or wrong? Or is there a middle ground here?
Well, I mean, I can speak for our own experience, which is the same experience as most EU countries. Well, as you probably know, and I think as the UK is similar, the EU a couple of years ago issued a directive that is flowing down to all individual countries' laws. Basically says part of the C-band that used to be used for satellites is now reallocated to 5G. That basically, as already happening in Spain, came very quickly into the Spanish regulator, and And yes, we are seeing these bands that go up to 3. So a standard C-band, just a quick refresher, goes on the downlink for satellites. Used to go from 3.7 to 4.2. Now the first 100 megahertz have gone to 5G. So it's now satellites now shrunk from 500 megahertz to 400 megahertz. It starts at 3.8 now. Now we have seen interferences from those bands. We were very quick to react, and we have all our C-band antennas installed with 5G filters, which basically means that the power coming from the 5G microwave towers basically have to stop interfering our services. We have to move some services, not many, that were in the affected band onto higher part of the C-band, and now we are okay. But as far as we know, we still have those 400 megahertz of C-band, which we can still use. So from that point of view, there is a lot of friction because spectrum is a limited resource and everyone wants to use it. Mobile operators are obviously a far more powerful, bigger lobby than the satellite is. And you know, if they ask and they need more spectrum, they're likely to get it. But this is not a problem that has happened recently. I mean, I'm looking at I'm thinking of Ka band now. I mean, Ka band has been for many years. It's about 2.5 gigahertz of the uplink and 2.5 gigahertz of downlink on the Ka band, the civil Ka band. We stop thinking about military Ka band for a sec. That is can be used by satellite. But probably about maybe 60 or 70% of that amount of bandwidth is a shared resource with microwave towers, not even 5G, not even mobile operators, pure, you know, traditional point-to-point, point-to-point microwave links. So, and then it goes back to the priority rule, you know, whoever comes first and asks if they can use that part of the spectrum, will get it. And if you come second, tough luck. You have to try to agree with that terrestrial operator to see if there is something you can do and work together. But you know, but again, it's something you have to live with. You know, the spectrum is such a values resource and limited resource that everyone wants to use it. And so far, until now, the ITU and different regulators, the only way they have found to be able to accommodate everyone's request is to share some of those bands, like it happens with some of the parts of the sub-bands of Ka, or give away to the ones that they think they need more, or maybe they need more, or basically are pushing more. They have bigger lobbies and they can obviously ask for it. From our point of view, Santander Teleport at the moment, we don't have a big problem as such at the moment. We can still operate C-band, we can still operate Ku band. Ka band, we haven't seen. We perform very recently. We performed a few months ago, I think it was January, a Ka band RF interference survey in all across different directions of our teleport, and we saw a clean spectrum. That doesn't mean that tomorrow it will be like that. It just means that there are no microwave links affecting us today. So it's just something that you have to live with, and you have to monitor and be very closely monitoring it, because it's one thing that is very, very hard that we have been trying to do with the Spanish regulator, and we're struggling to do, is to be granted an area around the teleport where we cannot receive interference. But it's a very, very difficult thing to be granted, because then in a way, when the government issues licenses to mobile operators, it makes it more difficult for them, or they don't know how to deal with it, because there's certainly a dark area they cannot touch.
Okay, now we're close to, we've got about 10 minutes left for the last question. Now, we cannot leave without mentioning the pandemic. I don't want to labour that point, but it has enforced changes that has caused the satellite sector to evolve in some ways. But what is the true impact on the satellite sector? And in this digital age, can business carry on as though nothing has happened? Now, Ray, I'd like you to start with that one.
Yes, an absolute major impact with us. It's supply chain issues. And being a manufacturer, we have requirements that we need raw products. Labor, again, that just falls right into that bucket of supply chain issues. And then trying to meet the demands of the customers, the antenna manufacturers, the end users, and their timelines. And it has caused us to have to play by the seat of our pants in many cases. We had a lot of challenges, and being a small company, we wear a lot of different hats. We have been fortunate that the pandemic, the illness itself, that we haven't been personally struck, and we never stopped coming in. Actually, here in the U.S., we were required to remain operational. Secretary of Defense, because we are a defense subcontractor, we supply the government and military, and many government and military operations outside of the United States rely on our product. So we were never shut down. And the problem is here in the U.S., and I don't know how it is overseas, but we had and are still experiencing this, and that is the labor pool greatly reduced. Try to get somebody to come to work, and we have that problem with our field operators. We have it here within. So we've had some major issues. It does look like it's starting to rebound a little bit, but those same supply chain issues has caused an increase in the cost of product, and that runs all the way down to the end user. So without carrying on too much, I think we're all tired of talking about it. That it has had a major impact on our end, and we've definitely had to try and meet those challenges. Can I give one small example? I really wanted to avoid talking about product.
Yeah.
Because it seems that all of these meetings always starts to revolve around somebody's product line and a promotion of that. And I'm a manufacturer. I'd love to sell everybody my product, but that's not what I'm here for. Our burners, for example, we've had for nearly 4 decades one supplier, a foundry that's been making our burners. We went out of business, and we were instantly left to scramble and find someone to manufacture that one item for us. We're the only people in the world that use it. It's a specially made product, patented design. And so in that scramble, this is from spring of last year, we've been bouncing around trying to find that one small item that can completely stop our production. And since then, we got creative. We found another way, and in my opinion, a better way. And it forced our hand to actually find a different way that actually improved our product. But it's still a challenge and a cost increase. So yes, we've had major issues because of the pandemic.
David, we're getting near the time, so you've got 2 minutes to tell me what the impact has been.
I mean, for us, we haven't had an impact operationally at all. We put measures very, very, very quickly in place. We got some people to work from home, those that had to come to the office, because obviously we need to keep the teleport running. They would come, but we had a number of sanitary measures in place. and a way of monitoring everyone's temperature when coming to the office, use of masks, reduction of social areas, etc., etc. We have been lucky that no one has, and I say lucky because there's a lot you can do at work, but you cannot control people outside work and what they do and what they socialize. So, or whether they follow or not the advice from the sanitary organization. So we've been lucky. We haven't suffered any issues. Where we have seen is a slowdown on business in a lot of the government projects. We focus a lot on the government sector, and both in Europe and the US, and we have seen, for example, to give an example, several US programs have been delayed by several months. Part of it blamed onto the elections, part of it blamed onto the COVID. So we have seen an impact, absolutely. The only thing I can think of is, what this crisis should tell us is that next time we had to be better prepared, because we were caught by surprise, but there is no excuse now for governments or organizations not to be ready for a possible future, whenever that could come, a future pandemic.
So Martin, I know you could talk for hours on this one, but I don't want you to. You got 2.5 minutes to give us your view on this impact.
Well, just about to complete my 29th year in home office. I didn't notice what happened when we all got locked down, because I'm in the same office I started off in, so nothing happened in that sense. But the step change outside, I think I've just seen something come in, and it's saying the collective work from home experience has shocked industries. In other words, this home office business is changing everything now. And I'd like to go back to what Ray said. It's funny, you were pushed into a corner because you relied on this supplier. They went out of business. But you got innovative. You started to think a different way around the problem. And I think that's what the changes are. I think we're going to innovate our way around it, but it won't be the same as we were. The way industry works will not be the same. We know about job losses, but there are job gains. It's been a real mix at the moment. I'm not sure it's a bad thing. The pandemic's a bad thing, but in terms for our industry, I think we might have learned a lot. For instance, what's the value of a trade show? I love the people bit, but what about all these sessions? And like we're doing now, the webinars, Richard, we're trying hard here to be different, because we have to be different if we're going to start mixing this way and hopefully live again. I think we will. So it's an interesting talk. Don't know the answer, but I've always said the trade show needed a good kick. Well, I got a kick this time, so I hope when they put on the new shows, they look stunningly different. Do you think so? Richard, over to you.
Well, I mean, I don't often get to answer my own questions, but I'm just going to add a little bit of insight here, having spoken to several people on and off for months now. And the general consensus is that they spent a vast fortune on trade shows before the pandemic hit. And yes, they've missed the one-to-one, but will they invest at the same levels when in fact they found an effective and alternative way to communicate with people? And the digital age has opened up and made everybody realize that you can survive even when you're confronted by something as dreadful as this pandemic. So I'm going to leave it on that note. We've come to the end of our time. I'd like to thank our guests, David, Martin and Ray, for giving us a new and interesting insight into the ground segment. I would also like to thank Walton DICE for sponsoring the roundtable discussion. Really appreciate that, Ray. Thank you for joining us. If you would like to use the online meeting rooms for further discussion, they are now open. And goodbye and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.